Hey, I'm here to talk about gaming houses due to the recent awesome interview with Oto Amne about his trials and tribulations with gaming houses and what he thinks that they kind of take away from players in terms of their invasion of privacy and the crushing guilt that comes with having your every move essentially examined, as it were, by your not only your colleagues but also the staff in the gaming house. I have probably, as a sports psychology trainer in eSport and as one of the preeminent player development coaches in League of Legends, I would say that I have a vast experience with dealing with gaming house issues, both with individual players and as trying to get the most out of a gaming house myself, helping construct gaming house culture and gaming house environments. And I wanted to make this video to talk about the problems that gaming houses actually solve, the problems that gaming houses present, and basically what I see is the only path forward for esport, which has to be fundamentally different from traditional sport for a reason that I will get into in a minute. So before I dive into it, I wanted to remind all of you that I have a daily show now, 6:30 p.m. Los Angeles time on Twitch, twitch.tv/MindGamesWeldon. Be sure to stop by and check it out. Right now, it's just the Ask Weldon show every single day. I film it maybe 15, 30 minutes, but then we have the live show, which is 60 minutes on Twitch, and I handle questions from the audience, from you guys before and after the show. But I'm diversifying that content. We're also going to be doing interviews and trainings as well. So if you want to check that out, make sure to go to twitch.tv/MindGamesWeldon. Okay. The history of gaming houses is really straightforward and financial. Orgs and players wanted to increase success and improve performance, so they wanted to get together and train in real life. But teams could not pay players salaries high enough for them to live by themselves. And at the same time, houses offer much better cost for benefit, I would say, ratio than business dwellings and business, offices and things like that. So it made much more sense to just get a house and all live together and pay basically a mortgage and or rent if you're renting from somebody, and you could get really good locations too in relation to where these major tournaments take place. So you could get much closer to the Riot Games LCS studio than you can with business offices, which cost far, far more to pull off. And that state of affairs has continued. And so mostly it's still a financial issue, and the fact that players are now conditioned to expect housing and things like that from their esport organizations. Unlike in traditional sport, which that's kind of an absurd idea, like players make a salary, they pay their taxes on it, and then they pay their rent and their housing from their own money. Right now, players expect for this to be kind of like a perk for being an esport athlete pro, that you get your housing pre-tax. So most players would still kind of like consign to that, to the fate of the gaming house in order to gain the monetary benefit that comes along with it, which is that you essentially get this perk pre-tax and without it affecting your salary in any way. Okay, so also there is the reality, and this is true, that teams want to recoup their investment in the players, right? They cannot, and up to this year, this was true, that teams could not take the massive risk of having one player who couldn't handle the responsibility of being independent and being on their own, because what it would mean is not just like losing a few games, but actually getting relegated from the professional scene and the death of the org. So orgs who were paying these players a large percentage of their actual revenue, sometimes even more than their revenue was, in total, right? So they're operating at a loss. They needed the investment to pay out. So they had to control every single aspect of risk associated with players. And truth to be told, a lot of players can't handle relationships and can't handle the motivational decision-making that goes along with that. And I don't mean a majority of players. What I mean is at least on every team, you can expect there to be maybe one player who's going to have issues with this at some point in the split. And this is a rotating problem, right? It's not going to be the same player every single month that's having the same issues, but something is going to be affecting performance in that regard. And right now, with the way that orgs only have 5 starting players, and they don't have this massive, bench with which to recruit and promote players that they can easily swap in and attain the same level of performance as before, you need those 5 starters to be on point throughout the whole year. And you have to take away any risk associated with that. So that's just a reality, right? That orgs want to be able to make sure that players can't mess things up by controlling every single factor that they can. Now, there's a switch that people go through when they are able to use relationships for increased performance instead of decreased performance. And there is a point at which your motivational decision making, so that is your decision making in relation to discipline in the absence of motivation. So seeing motivation as an emotion, sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't, and then you decide, okay, I don't have motivation right now, but I'm still going to make disciplined choices about what I do with my time in order to achieve my long-term goals and live up my values. Like, there are players that can do that, and you grow into that, right? And you grow into that kind of like over a series of progressive pushing of your limits, and development of that responsibility usually happens between 18 and 22 for traditional athletes when they're in university. And the ones that can't handle it and can't grow that way are filtered out and never make it to the pro leagues because they can't balance studies and life in the NCAA. And so we don't have that filter in eSport. And on top of that, we don't have a way of identifying very well people who are using relationships effectively versus ineffectively. And I'll give you an example. I was listening to a recent interview with Shaquille O'Neal, and he was talking about how, he went to this championship match and he lost, and he realized that he wasn't taking his obligations to his children that he had to support with his income like with full force, responsibly. And so the next time he had an opportunity to win a championship, he went onto that court, and this isn't true just for the game. This is true every single game leading up to that opportunity, with the full weight of that responsibility of those relationships upon him, and that allowed him to perform and to maximize his growth and potential at a higher level than people who didn't have the obligation of that relationship upon them. This is how people who essentially have less time in their lives and who are older can use the impact of the seriousness with which they take their craft to outperform people who are younger and maybe a little more flippant about it, right? And I saw in eSport, this is already happening. Okay, I saw, for example, story time, when I was coaching TSM and I was coaching Double Lift, Peter, he entered into a relationship and his performance went through the roof. His leadership ability, his shot calling ability, his calmness within the game, his dedication to his training, and his skill improvement, literal mechanical improvement as champions, all went up drastically compared to the beginning of the split and in the split before, because he was very serious about the balance between obligation and craft. And he knew that he was going to have less time, and so the time that he had, he took more seriously, and as a result, he got more out of it. Okay, this is the switch that eventually flips in people when they get into a relationship that becomes something that builds them up instead of distracts them. And everybody gets to this point in their life. And it's important for eSport orgs to be able to notice when this switch happens so that they can help people graduate to this kind of independent situation and possibly out of gaming houses. And it's also important to help people who are in relationships that are not there yet to see how this can be a way to execute high-performance careers within functional relationships, okay? So the main issues that we need to solve if we're going to deal with gaming houses is we need to find a way to help players build on their capability to handle relationships in a way that builds up their performance. We need to help players with motivational decisions until they develop the discipline necessary to act more like, people who've graduated from the NCAA athletics into pro sphere versus people who are just exiting high school. We need to protect team investments because it's still a really risky situation. We still don't have huge rosters that we can swap players in and out if they just start failing all of a sudden. And players still want to save money. They still want these perks that they're used to, where they're essentially getting free housing, you would say, pre-tax within the structures that they have, which might have to go away in and of itself, because usually when companies do this, it's a perk, and it's also taxed at the same rate in a lot of states, and especially in the EU. So that might be something that goes away regardless. But anyway, the path forward for this is campuses. We have to mimic what colleges do with graduated responsibility, where you start out where you have your housing taken care of, you have your food taken care of, you have your laundry facilities taken care of, and you have a training facility independent from where you live that you're able to go to and start to grow that responsibility. And then as you graduate up every level, you can simply take advantage of all the cost-saving and convenience features that the campus offers while still becoming independent of your own accord. Living even at the end, maybe in double lift situation, living even off campus, where he can kind of steer his own life and then dedicate himself to his craft when he goes to work. Now, the other amazing benefit that campuses offer is just through the sheer nature of how esport works, where you have an organization that has a lot of different teams, right? And these orgs have cultures above the team level. So, for example, TSM is a perfect example of this. If TSM was able to create a campus, like TSM and Team Liquid have both pioneered this idea of campuses in eSport. Team Liquid is actually actively working on it, right? Echo Fox, I'll come to that in a second. TSM has this culture that if they were able to extend to their other eSport organizations across a campus, they could duplicate the resources, or they wouldn't have to duplicate the resources. They could have a sports psychology trainer to service all their whole campus. They could have one chef who could provide nutritious meals for the whole campus, right? And Reginald would be able to provide this kind of like TSM culture and way of doing business to his whole swath of esport athletes, no matter the craft. And when you would see their Vainglory team go on stage, when you would see their PUBG team or their Fortnite team go on stage, they would exude the same TSM culture that exists in League of Legends that comes from essentially Reginald and the players there and the way that they handle themselves. And the same with Optic, for example. If the Green Wall campus was set up and they were able to bring over their kind of bravado and the way that they handle business in the shooting games over to League of Legends and the League of Legends roster because of the influence of how it is that they lived and acted and trained together, as a full group on a campus, they could very quickly bring up rookie players in the Optic way, I would say, and have that kind of permeation of the Greenwall attitude across esports. So when you were watching an Optic team 3 years from now in a completely new esport, it would feel like the same energy, right? Echo Fox is doing this very well already because they simply adopted a sporting style culture, which obviously comes from Rick and is infesting the org and the players, at all levels. So when you see the players talk in interviews, when you see the way that they approach their training, they all are talking with sport metaphors, and they've all heavily influenced by this like sporting style. And the fact that they have a training facility and they are trying to set up this kind of like campus structure also denotes the fact that they're, taking this opportunity, I would say, that you have an esport to do this kind of amalgamation of culture. They're taking it very seriously. So this is what I would like to see. This, I believe, is the solution and the obvious step forward. And I'm really excited to see it happen because it means lots of opportunities for the kinds of specialist staff that right now struggle to find a place because they have to work more or less as contractors, here and there across the orgs. They can establish themselves within a brand and I'm the physiotherapist for TSM, and they handle all 30 of their athletes, and they constantly are getting challenged by new clients, and they're investing, and they have a stable position where they can invest in themselves and constantly, grow and tackle new challenges as new athletes come in. So I think that this is going to provide actually a really interesting infrastructure for orgs to adopt and to move forward. And I think it's going to be the shape of the industry to come as the financial situations are much more stabilized, and as the leagues are much more stabilized, it only makes sense that orgs would start to do this. That is my answer. That is my solution. Those are my thoughts on the issue. I have experienced every single problem that gaming houses bring, and I've solved a lot of the problems myself. I think that actually, although there is a lot of complaining by athletes do also recognize that they are getting a lot of cost savings right now from the gaming house structure, and they are being, I would say, protected in a way themselves from their own bad decisions. And I think a lot of athletes would tell you, I've used the gaming house to my benefit to be lazier than I would like to be because I know that it's going to be taken care of. All this stuff is off my plate and I don't have to worry about it. And I mean, that's just true, and it feels good to be like, I don't have to take care of any of this stuff. And I can just focus on my performance. But as people start to chafe at that and they want to move out of it, with a nod to how much beneficial it has been for their career, I think that is something that needs to happen if we do want to start to flourish and have these 23 to 25-year-old plus athletes that are able to be successful in esports as they age up. All right, that's all I have for you today. Please come and check out my daily show, 6:30 p.m. Los Angeles time. Figure that out for your time zone. I think that's 9:30 or 10:30 in New York. 1 hour. Turn on notifications on the channel so that you know when it goes live. We have a pre-show conversation, lots and lots of questions in the audience. I handle all of them. Then I record the actual show with called-in questions. You can come to the channel and figure out how to call in your question. It's pretty easy. And then we do the post-show chat where we're hanging out and answering any questions that came up during the show, as well as digging into whatever issues people want to talk about there. And then that's it. Sign off, go to the gym, and go on with the rest of the day. So make sure to come and join me for that show. It's a lot of fun, and I hope to see you there.